Hey, what's going on, guys? Mackenzie Long here. And so we have another reaction video. This one is from PBS called Why So Many Americans in the Middle Class Have No Savings. I'm excited to share this with you. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Mackenzie Long. I've been teaching people how money works for the last 9 years. It's something that's not taught in schools, which means most people are financially illiterate, meaning they make lots of mistakes when it comes to money, and they're oftentimes being taken advantage of. The lack of financial literacy is a huge problem in our society, and obviously when you're solving big problems, there's lots of opportunity and lots of money to be made. And now that I've recruited hundreds of agents and now I have thousands of clients and students, one of the things that's come more prevalent to me is the understanding that almost everybody struggles with money. And I'm excited to be bringing a lot of these reaction videos to you. If you have videos that you would like for me to review or watch them and get my reaction from on YouTube, definitely send them my way. And don't forget to smash that like button as well. And let's go ahead and get into this video.
But first, financial fragility. Most American households did slightly better economically in 2015 than 2014, according to a recent survey by the Federal Reserve. 69% said they were living comfortably or doing okay, up from 65%. But 31% said they were either struggling to get by or just getting by, a figure that includes millions of middle-class Americans. In fact, it can be surprising to learn just which Americans continue to struggle. Judy Woodruff has the latest in our series with The Atlantic.
By almost any measure, Neal Gabler has led a successful life. He's published respected biographies of Walt Disney, Barbra Streisand, and Walter Winchell, written for leading newspapers and magazines, taught at prestigious universities. He's a husband and the father of 2 daughters, now launched in their own successful careers. He lives in New York's Long Island enclave, the Hamptons, a place of natural beauty and mecca for wealth and celebrity. And yet, for years, Neal Gabler harbored a dark secret.
It's very difficult. I'll tell you who it's really been difficult on is my wife.
Being the writer that he is, Gabler decided to come to terms with his secret by writing about it.
I never write about myself, so I didn't embark on this project saying, oh gosh, I can't wait to write about my own failures, which is basically what the article is about. But really the spring of this piece was reading a news item about the Federal Reserve Household Economic Survey, in which they asked the question, if you had a $400 emergency, could you meet that emergency? And 47% of the respondents said that they couldn't meet that emergency without either having to borrow money or to sell something.
Over the last 9 years, I've been repeating this message, and obviously it's changed the numbers. It gets closer to 50, whatever it might be. Each study's a little bit different, but it's usually close to that 50% mark. And here's what's really interesting is that when you say that to somebody, they almost just roll their eyes and expect it to be somebody else. And the reason why I think financial literacy has such a hard time, or why people are reluctant to receive it, is because most people feel like it's something outside of them. It's almost like our standard of living has become, can I make it to the end of the month and still be able to eat? And nothing beyond that. They're not thinking about the future. They're not thinking about the things that they would like to do. They're not thinking about their dreams. They're not really saving much money. And they're just kind of barely getting by. And that's where I see a lot of people being. And I would say in 9 years, I've seen maybe 1 or 2 people. And I've worked with majorly wealthy people. I mean, into the millions of dollars for contracts that they get. And almost everybody is struggling with money. I would say that number is probably into the 90%. I think 47% is low, but let's go with their numbers and see what they have the rest to say in this video. What they have to say about the rest of this video.
And I read that item and I said to myself, well, who knew? But of course I knew, because many, many times in my life, and not just in the distant past, but in the unfortunate present, I couldn't afford those $400.
And that's the hard truth. Despite all his outward signs of success, Neal Gabler is frequently broke. His recent story in the Atlantic magazine brought widespread attention to that fact.
Did you hesitate at all about baring your personal life?
very much so. I'm not the kind of person who really likes to expose himself. But then that reluctance became part of the article itself, because I coined the term in the article, financial impotence. And it struck me that talking about our financial situation is very much like men not wanting to talk about sexual impotence. It's just not something you do. It's an embarrassment. It's a shame. It's a humiliation. And financial problems are exactly the same thing.
That's so true. Now, obviously, I haven't had the impotence issue yet. I'm still in my 30s, but I can understand what that, I can't even imagine what that would feel like. And I think that's a great analogy to what people experience when they're having financial troubles. And that's probably the biggest reason why people don't get help when they know they need it. And the really interesting part is the vast majority of them are praying every single night before they go to bed and every morning when they wake up. Will somebody help me? Can somebody change this financial situation for me? And possibly the issue is they think that it's going to change by something outside of them, that it's just going to get easier to handle money, or they're going to somehow just have a bunch of money hit their bank account. The challenge is that never works. I mean, we all love those shows of people who hit the mega bucks and they win millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And within years, they're back to the same position they were in as being broke and having nothing. And that's the lack of financial literacy. They don't understand what to do with it when they have it. And it can feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you have nobody to talk to and nobody to help you. And if you continue to stay in that situation where you're unwilling to ask for help, you are going to lose everything you love and everything you care about into the future. You are going to struggle for the rest of your life if you don't start seeking help. And it takes a strong person to reach out and get help when they need it. The challenge is it almost never happens. And even when I or somebody comes knocking on the door to help them out financially, their ego is so strong, they oftentimes have a hard time admitting that they even need help, let alone making the changes necessary that they need to be able to continue with that dream or that vision that they have for the future.
So I thought perhaps I can help those people who feel shamed and embarrassed and humiliated and show them, look it, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to expose all of my faults, all of my mistakes, all of my failures. You're not alone.
What do you say, buddy? How's everything?
Hang it in there. Hang it in there.
Gabler knew he wasn't alone even before writing the article due to weekly chats with Brian Brunges, an East Hampton butcher.
Brian the Butcher is my friend. He's a wonderful, easy guy to talk to. And gradually, over time, we'd talk about our financial situation. Very, very rare, particularly among men. And I remember one day, especially, this was one of those periods where I didn't have the $400, and unfortunately they come all too frequently. And he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I've been in the same situation, I've got this expense and that expense. If anybody tells you that they're sailing through, they're lying.
Everybody struggles. I have a child with autism. He was diagnosed 20 years ago. Okay, my wife had to stop working. Became a one income family. We accumulated a lot of outside expenses. So I struggled. But you know what? I got to do what I got to do.
That was almost the final push to write the piece. Because, you know, he's right. There are so many people in trouble.
This is absolutely true. I would say into the high 90% of the population, probably higher than that, will not retire or stop working the way that they expected. That the vast majority of them struggle with money, they have lots of debt, and they want to do something different. They just don't know who to talk to and they don't know who to trust. And especially among men, because it's kind of a machismo type thing, a macho type thing of, I can't let anybody know that I'm struggling with money, because that would show my inadequacies, my exactly what he was saying earlier, my impotence, if you will. And that burden, that challenge to actually come out and say something is very, very real.
They won't talk about it. Brian is one of the very few who would be open with me, and I was able to be open with him as a result, so that we were able to share this.
It kind of like took a weight off my shoulder, knowing that a guy like Neal, you know, he's got a house in East Hampton. You figure, you know, he's doing all right for himself, but he's not. Everybody's struggling, you know, and it's tough.
The middle class is in desperate straits. I think that's
Edward Wolf is a professor of economics at New York University.
Today, the average family has enough financial reserves to keep it going for about 3 weeks. That's it. And that's middle income. And if you go further down the ladder, basically the financial reserves can keep the family going for a couple of days at most. And so, you know, these financial reserves have just completely evaporated.
So basically what he's saying is that most families, if you kind of relate that, if the average family makes $4,000 or $5,000 a month, it's a little bit over $1,000, maybe $1,250 a week. So the average family has less than $4,000 or $5,000 set aside. Most of them could survive 3 days without income. And that's been true through the entire career of my life. This is what I see every single day. This is where people are struggling. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to get help. And they're stuck in this cycle of just being paycheck to paycheck.
And the way we formulated the question is, how confident are you that you could come up with $2,000 if an unexpected need arose within the next month? And what we found is 40% of families could not come up with $2,000 in 30 days. So it's important to recognize that the financial fragility is just so widespread.
The main reason is that we've had a long period of wage stagnation in this country, even going further back, even to the mid-1970s. So in the face of stagnating incomes, what did families do? Well, for a while they did accumulate wealth, and this was buoyed by the housing price boom of going forward until 2006, and then suddenly the housing market collapsed, and so did net worth.
That's absolutely amazing to me that the vast majority of families, nearly 50%, couldn't come up with $2,000 if they needed it. And the challenge of simply not making enough money. And this is why I think that if you're making between $50,000 and $100,000 a year, if not more, you need some kind of side hustle. You've got to find a way to get your income up, because that fixes everything else. That's really step one in anything that you're going to start doing financially, is you've got to have more money coming in. Because if you're living paycheck to paycheck, then you're stuck. There's not a whole lot you can do. And most people are unwilling to cut their expenses down and change their lifestyle because they want to impress other people. So that first start is going to be making more money. That's how you get out of debt. That's how you start saving more money. That's how you start to change your situation. And so in the short term, I think a lot of people need to find a way to make additional income, whether it's getting into real estate or getting into financial services like I do. There are things that you can do to create additional income and start putting money into a bucket that pays residual income. So it's getting out of thinking about money on the day-to-day basis and what I get paid per hour to how do I start shifting that to I can get paid even when I'm not working. And it's gonna start off very, very slow, just like savings does. You don't see a lot of compounding interest in the very beginning, but it's that slowly buying your life back over time. Can I start making a little bit of passive income, a little bit of residual income over time, and then maybe over the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, if it took you 15 years to be able to replace your income, to now you have time and you can spend your time creating other income or doing whatever it is that you want to do. It's the idea of learning how to go from earned income to passive income.
How much of what you would describe as your financial condition is due to decisions that Neal Gabler made, and how much of it is due to outside circumstances beyond your control?
That's a great question, and I want to take responsibility. I don't want to put everything off on these larger financial forces. And I chose to become a writer. This is the most financially perilous profession that one can possibly imagine, except possibly being an actor. I chose to live in New York City because I thought I needed to be close to magazines and publishers that I needed for my writing career. So I did that. And New York is expensive. I chose to have 2 children. Children are expensive. I made the choice to send them to expensive colleges. So those were all choices that I made that had serious financial consequences. But again, those choices were what I call life.
This opens up the conversation, and this is where it gets tough, right? Because it starts to get you can tell he's starting to get emotional and that he wants to take responsibility for this. But here's the interesting thing, that if somebody like myself or a financial professional can get to somebody in their 20s and 30s, the financial literacy is so important, because the difference between living the dream that people want, the way that they want to spend their final years, and not doing that is simply the mismanagement of $200 to $300 a month. So his choice wasn't where he lived. His choice, don't put that blame on having kids. Don't put that blame on your profession. Don't put the blame on anything else. It's the decision that it's not worth it to save $200 or $300 a month. That's really what it comes down to. He could have still done all of those other things and saved $200 or $300 a month. And now that argument always comes up, well, what about people who aren't making enough money and blah, 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 blah. Look, I understand that. I understand there's a small percentage of the population that is never going to be able to climb out of the hole that they're in. Those aren't the people that I'm talking to, because they are not watching this video and they are not concerned with what they're doing, because generally they have such a low IQ, no offense, that they can't climb out of where they're at. And that's why we need to have these programs to help take care of people. I'm talking about the other 90% that have the ability for upward mobility and that can do something different in their life if they're willing to learn something different. Now, those people who choose not to do that, there's not much that can really be done for them, but for that other 90% of the population, they can make that difference if they want to, if they're willing to take responsibility and start saving.
So, I accept responsibility. On the other hand, since roughly half of Americans are suffering the same sort of financial fragility I'm in, we can't say that they're all imbeciles. What we have to say is that there are
50% of marriages fail, so I should just expect that I'm going to fail as well. It's kind of a cop-out. Look, I'm not taking anything away from this guy. He's had a great career. I love that he's coming out about these things, but this is exactly the conversation that I have when I'm sitting down with couples and I'm looking at their situation. They're 50, 60 years old, and they're trying to reminisce on where it all went wrong. And they want to take responsibility, but life happened. And the reason why I say it's not an excuse is because life happens to everybody. So how is it that 50% of the population, is what he's saying here, is able to figure it out and 50% is not? And I think those numbers are skewed. It's less than that probably. But the difference being is, were those people willing to educate themselves and make that sacrifice of a couple $100s a month into savings? We're not talking about becoming millionaires and billionaires here. We're talking about putting enough away that they could actually do something and have some freedom and some dignity in their retirement years. And I think a lot of people are not willing to make that short-term sacrifice to have that into the future.
Forces beyond our control.
Let me ask you a couple of other questions about personal decisions you made.
Absolutely.
You brought it up yourself. The decision to live here. We're in East Hampton. People think, living in the Hamptons? That's a really expensive part of America.
When people hear that I live in the Hamptons, the first thing they say to me is, oh my gosh.
He just admitted one of the biggest reasons why he has not done well financially. And this is important for you. If you've purchased something for the pure purpose of making people make that face. Oh my God, you drive a Porsche? Oh my God, you have a Mercedes? Oh my God, you live here? Then that is exactly what's going to keep you from having wealth. The face that he made is the reason why he purchased this house, and this is the reason why he lives where he lives, and this is the reason why he lives beyond his means. Because he wanted the perception that he was doing well financially, when in reality he was not.
Yes, I do live in the Hamptons, and when I bought this house, I could afford it. It wasn't exorbitantly expensive. I was able to afford it for a very long time. This is all cedar, but you can see how many shingles are missing here.
Right. These days, though, the house has fallen into disrepair. It's in desperate need of a new roof. Floorboards are rotting. It has not seen fresh paint in many years.
If I had $100,000, I could probably get it done.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about moving to a less expensive part of the country?
We did, and we've talked about that, but here's the catch-22 of that. If we were, once the recession hit, the house lost its value, as it did for, most Americans. So now the house is deteriorating, it's lost its value. So if I had the resources to fix up the house to sell it, I wouldn't need to sell it.
So this is just more justification of why he doesn't want to leave the house. And people do this with everything. They do it with that $1,000 a month car payment they have. And I have to have a car. I need to be able to get around. It's got to be big enough for me and the kids. They're not willing to drive around in a hoopty for a couple of years to get their finances right. He wasn't willing. He didn't have to wait till the middle of the pandemic to be able to sell this house and move out. He could have done it years before that. And regardless of how that was, the thing with real estate is that if you're selling your house at a lower price, you're also buying at a lower price. If you're selling at a high price, you're also buying at a high price. That's why I have a challenge when people want to put all of their money into their house. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing if you have a plan for it, but you being able to be mobile is not very easy to do when all of your assets are in your house and all of your savings is in your house. So there's other strategies that need to be looked at versus maybe just paying down a house. And lots of people are always pulling money out of their house, so they never even have the situation to be able to, so they're always in a situation where they can't move because of the equity issues.
That's the catch-22. I am a financial illiterate, and financial illiterates pay a heavy price for their financial illiteracy.
Gabler is not using the term financial illiteracy loosely. It's a phenomenon.
So they've done calculations on this. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's into the thousands of dollars a year. Being financially illiterate, just the simple mistakes we made. And we're not even able to calculate really what that turns into, because the vast majority of people who answer those questionnaires are financially illiterate, so they don't know what the actual costs are. It's probably way worse than they estimate, but they estimate it's about $1,200 per US individual. Now, if you were to take $1,200 and compound that annually for 30 or 40 years, you're talking $800,000 that it costs people over their lifetime to be financially illiterate. And I think that that's on the low side. So literally hundreds of thousands of dollars into the millions of dollars is lost per individual simply because they don't understand how money works. We won't teach it in school. And I don't think we'll ever accurately teach it in school because the banks make too much money off of it. The government makes too much money off of it. Lending institutions make too much money off of it. There's too much money and lobbying powers in keeping people financially illiterate than they're willing to actually let go of to allow our economy to come back, because that's how we fix this thing. We don't fix this thing by a new politician. We don't fix this thing by new laws. We fix this thing by educating and empowering people to understand what they're doing financially. But the vast majority of the US is unaware or unwilling to do anything about it because there's just too much money being thrown around, keeping everybody ignorant and in the dark, because they lose lots of money because of mistakes and they're easy to take advantage of. And that's a lot of what exactly happened here.
Economists say is a key factor in the current fragility of the middle class.
We measure financial literacy by looking at basic financial knowledge. We are experiencing much more complex financial markets, much more complex financial products?
It's more complex because the responsibility has been put on the individual. I just did a video, a reaction video on this. You should go watch it. It was about what happened to the pension and then also went into the 401k. It kind of ties into both. But when pensions went away, where we would work for a company and that company would promise to take care of us after we were done working, those went away. And they went away because they were too costly for the company. There were lots of factors behind that. You can watch those videos, but it turned into a 401k. And the reality behind what happened was the businesses and government said, we don't want the responsibility of being responsible for your retirement years. So here's a 401k. You are now responsible for yourself. And now that you're responsible for yourself, you have to figure it out. But we never educated people. It's like handing them a loaded gun and never teaching them how to operate it. And then we're surprised the vast majority of Americans don't make it.
Than in the past. And the knowledge of people has not kept up.
Half of America will have to compromise on their dreams. There's one statistic that I cite in the piece from a USA Today survey, which I think is fascinating. And that survey determined that a middle-class existence in America would cost $130,000
A year.
a year. The median income in America is somewhere around $50,000. So a middle-class existence was more than 2 times as great as the median income. And what that tells you is that the face of financial fragility is the face of the college-educated as well as those without a high school diploma. It's the face of, white America as well as the face of minority Americans, who obviously suffer much greater. This is an equal opportunity situation. This is an equal opportunity situation. It affects so many of us. It's a great sadness to think that people feel compelled to give up their dreams of what they thought a modest middle-class life would be. But they have. They have. Even I have.
Man, and you can just see the pain in his face. And I appreciate his vulnerability and his willingness to come out and talk about these things, because I think that's really hard for people to do. And the challenge is the lack of financial literacy hurts everybody. And looking at that, they've done calculations on this, that the average person who's financially illiterate, it costs them over $1,200 per year. Now that's asking financially illiterate people what it costs them. So obviously that's not a very accurate number. It's probably way more than that. But if you take $1,200 and you compound that at a 7 or 8% rate of return for 30 or 40 years, you're talking about the difference of $800,000. So hundreds of thousands of dollars into the millions of dollars is lost per person, not per household, per person, because of the lack of financial literacy. When I learned this stuff, it hurt me so deeply that I decided to start teaching people about it, because nobody told me. My mom is very well educated, PhDs, all of that. My mom is very well educated, spent her entire life in the school district. My dad's done all different types of work. He's done some entrepreneurial stuff. He's worked for companies. Nobody has taught me any of that stuff. I have family members who are fairly wealthy. They never taught me any of this stuff. Most families don't know the difference between a stock and a bond. And yet, the challenge is that all of the responsibility, with pensions being gone, Social Security almost obsolete, and now all of the responsibility is on the individual to figure out how to handle their retirement, how to handle their final years. And they have never been educated on how to do it. It's like handing a loaded gun to a kid and expecting somebody to not get hurt. So how is it in the most prevalent country in the world, we've handed the responsibility to people, and yet nobody is willing to educate them? And I think there's just too much money to be made to not do it. There's too much money going into other places to keep people financially illiterate. So if this is something that's impacted you and you want to help other people, reach out to me or find a way to get into the industry so that you can make a difference. if you're struggling with these things, I didn't want this video to be a downer. I want this video to open the door and show the light that if you're dealing with these things, if you're struggling with these things, so is everybody else. So get help. There's no point in sitting there and struggling and worrying about it for the rest of your life. So whether you reach out to me or you reach out to somebody in your community or somebody that you know or somebody that you care about, just reach out and get help. You would be surprised how willing people are in the industry to teach these things. It's actually a breath of fresh air when we get somebody that goes, hey, will you start educating me about these things? What can you teach me about this? I want to learn about these things. Because people are generally so embarrassed that they're afraid to ask, that even when we approach them, they go, no, I'm good, no big deal, I've got this stuff figured out, even though every single night they're praying for help and they're not getting any. And then somebody knocks on their door to help them and they don't know what to do with it. So if that's you, get help. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you got a lot out of this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and comment as well, maybe when you started figuring some of these things out or how starting to figure some of these things out really changed your life. And then don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. That way you can see additional reaction videos, different cool things that we're doing in our life, different thoughts and processes and financial education that we're putting out there so that people can get out of these financial situations. And I'd love to come alongside of you and help with those things. And again, hope this was helpful for you, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.